All right. Okay, recording. Rick, welcome to the podcast.
How's it going, mate? Nice to be here.
Yeah, very, very good. And I have a whole kind of sheet full of questions that I'm keen to ask you. And we've got 60 minutes and we'll fly through most of them, hopefully. Where I want to start is a very simple question. What are you working on at the moment, which you're most excited about?
Oh, that's a good one. What am I working on at the moment? So I think the biggest thing I'm working on at the moment is to really build out one of my offerings as part of the practice in functional medicine in particular. And I mean, I've been practicing functional medicine now for over a decade. And the more I learn, the more capacity I have to help people, the more responsible I feel to be able to deliver that in a platform, through my services, to just be able to help people to the best of my capacity. And one of the things I've struggled with over the years is developing a system and a process that just helps maximize the scope of what I have to offer in a way that's sort of practical and doesn't sort of keep me locked to a desk for hours and hours. So what I'm working on at the moment is building out a educational portal for my patients that are going through my functional medicine program. And it's taken a bit of time, but it's going to be amazing, I think. And it's just going to deliver so much more value and helps, I guess, on one hand, just really educate the patient through the process. And also, from my perspective, it just helps sort of ease off some of the workload, because I find myself saying the same thing over and over again so many times that I've just got to get it all down into a video or into some documentation. So I think one of the big projects I'm working on now is really just to build out my offering around functional medicine in particular. And I'm not sure when it's going to be ready, but it's getting there. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome, Rick.
Yeah.
And what a great place to start. So a lot of people will be like, what's functional medicine? So how on earth did you become a functional medicine doctor? And what does it mean to you?
Okay. So functional medicine is a different way of looking about health and disease. So you could describe it as a sort of root cause analysis approach, a systems biology approach. It's essentially trying to identify and address the underlying causes of people's health issues rather than just treating symptoms. So there's pills for palliation, but they rarely address what's really going on under the surface. So functional medicine is a framework or a system of medicine that evaluates a patient in their environment, taking into consideration their whole being, and tries to understand what is it within that individual that is contributing or causing their health problems at the root. And a lot of the work centers around evaluation. So we take a lot of history, gathering information, running a lot of laboratory tests to try to understand what's really going on objectively. And then we intervene really through diet, lifestyle, like modifications, targeted nutritional supplementation, modifications to their diet, their environment, just to really give the body what it needs, get rid of all the things that are obstructing their innate health sort of expression, and hoping that we get much better outcomes than just focusing on symptoms alone. So it's really a way of thinking. It's a paradigm shift really when it comes to understanding why people get sick and how to recover them.
And so what would be some of the most common ailments that you get with people coming to you?
Yeah, most people come in with a whole list of symptoms. So it's never generally just one thing.
Okay.
But I would say some of the more common presentations I see would be energy problems, a lot of fatigue, tired all the time, usually combined with cognitive challenges, just foggy thinking, brain fog, forgetfulness.
So hard to know when you're actually like that as well. Because
It
you probably
is,
like
yeah.
it all the time.
Yeah, maybe it's a friend or family member that sort of, brings it to their attention. They'll often have, like the early signs of cognitive decline or just poor memory. They just forget where they put their keys and that kind of thing. There's a lot of gut issues I see. So a lot of people will have bloating and gas, bowel changes, reflux, constipation, diarrhea. They may have been given a diagnosis of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or maybe they have inflammatory bowel diseases. So gastrointestinal symptoms are a common presenting sort of, presentation, I should say. A lot of people also have hormonal type of symptoms. So it could be women with perimenopausal symptoms or postmenopausal symptoms, or men just feeling like their libido's down and their moods down, and they suspect maybe some sex hormone imbalances. It might relate to the thyroid gland and the thyroid hormones, which ties into low energy states and that kind of thing. But also, stress-related factors relating to stress hormones and adrenal function. So I would say gut problems, fatigue and energy problems, and cognitive issues and things would be the kind of like the main thing people see. But they'll often have other issues like skin complaints, joint aches and pains. I'm also an osteopath, as you know, so I do see a lot of patients that come in with chronic musculoskeletal pain, and their whole body's just inflamed, and they think it's a muscle problem or a joint problem. But oftentimes when you dig deep into this, it's an inflammatory issue, often coming from poor diet and lifestyle, poor gut health, nutrient deficiencies. So we see a whole range of different issues, but I would say mainly centers around fatigue, hormones, and gut problems.
Okay. And can you think of a good example of someone as a case study, perhaps in the last couple of years, that came to you with a series of problems that through that functional medicine lens, you were able to really drive amazing outcomes?
Yeah, there's lots of people that come to mind. I guess it'd be maybe a little bit tricky to think of one in particular, but there's been many patients that have come to see me, usually at wit's end. They've tried everything.
Really?
They've gone through the conventional system. A lot of the time, the lab tests come back completely normal. So the doctor says everything
You're
looks fine
fine.
on paper, but they really just don't feel well.
Yeah.
That's my typical patient. They come and see me when they're lost hopes, really, or absolute train wrecks.
Yeah.
And for the vast majority of people, through the system of evaluation and assessment that we have, we often will find really key factors going on within their system that are addressed through diet lifestyle interventions. So one of the cases that stand out was actually one of my first patients that I saw when I was back in the UK. And this is when I was new to functional medicine, and I was just kind of dabbling with it on the fringes of my osteopathic practice. So this patient, she came in and she was suffering with an autoimmune disease called psoriatic arthritis, which you might have heard of. And it's like an inflammatory condition that affects the joints and is associated with psoriasis, so like an inflammatory skin condition. And she'd been on all the conventional medicine kind of pharmacology, and she'd sort of worked her way up from steroids to these quite significant immune suppressing medications. And despite that, still had raised inflammatory markers and was experiencing joint pain. So she came to see me for relief for some musculoskeletal aches and pains as an osteopath. But in the conversation, and as I was sort of learning about functional medicine, we decided to explore her nutrition and her lifestyle. And I was somewhat new to this, and I was kind of doing this almost for free, just running some lab tests on the side of osteopathic treatment. And we did blood work, we did stool analysis, we checked hormones, we're looking for nutrient deficiencies and food sensitivities, and a whole range of things came back. So she had like low vitamin D, her inflammatory markers were elevated. She had a range of different food sensitivities. Her gut lining was leaky, so-called leaky gut. And she had a bacterial overgrowth and some fungal overgrowth in the bowel. And just by modifying the diet, getting her on some targeted nutritional therapy approaches and some natural anti-inflammatory approaches, for the first time, the inflammatory markers on her blood work came back to normal. Then after so many months of this strategy, she decided to, with the work of the prescribing doctor, come off of her immune suppressing medications and essentially put the condition into remission. Now, it's not something that you can say you can cure, but remission is the goal. And I still see her, annually just for a review, and she's been doing great. And she's implemented significant diet changes and stress management. And she just kind of has taken responsibility for her health. And rather than just take suppressive medications, anti-inflammatories or disease modifying drugs, she's actually we actually found root causes of her issues. That was quite a powerful case for me because it was one of my first and maybe one of my best results.
Well, and very inspiring. It's like, holy shit! Look at the impact I've had on this person's life. Like, it must be such a cool thing to be able to do that for someone. like as almost like an energetic exchange. Like it would fill you with all sorts of positive vibes and like, well, let's see how many other people I can help. And actually, Rick, it struck me as you were talking then, like there's obviously, you have a very keen sense of curiosity. You're trained as an osteopath, but someone's come through the door and you're like, well, hang on, what else can I do to
Mm.
help this person? And I'm someone who's like played around in the entrepreneurship space a lot in the last 10 years, and it's all about ideas and bringing ideas to life. But in the health space, it's kind of exactly the same mindset in a way, isn't it? It's like, well, hang on, what if I change this and that changes that, and how?
Yeah.
So do you think are some people just made out to be like that, or is that just a personal trait of yours that you just always followed?
Oh yeah, I guess maybe. Yeah, good question. I think that line of inquiry,
Yeah. It's
I
like,
guess I've
ask
always
another
been.
question, like
Yeah,
what's really underneath that?
but
Yeah.
why? You know what? I remember back in science school
Yeah.
being kicked out of the class because I kept asking why too much, and I was probably just being a little bit of a twat, like as a
Yeah.
kid, being a bit.
Why?
Why? But I really did just want to know why, and the answer that they gave didn't satisfy my understanding. But why? And I guess functional medicine and osteopathy is really the kind of science of why. It's asking questions, and it's really understanding what's behind that and what's behind that again. When the domino falls, how far up the chain do you have to go to figure out what actually started this process in the first place? And that's the sort of systems biology thinking and appreciating how everything's really connected. Everything's cause and effect. And I think for some of us, that way of thinking just comes innately, especially if you're in a profession where that type of thinking is required, like engineering, solving problems and fixing things. So I was always kind of that way inclined, I guess. But then as I studied osteopathy from the beginning, they were teaching principles that were instilling this type of way of thinking. And once you see it that way, it's hard to unsee it. And I think with conventional medicine today, and I think with a lot of aspects of our modern lives, we are just focusing on the quick fix, the problem, without really appreciating where it's actually coming from. And I guess that extrapolates into so many different areas.
So this is an idea that I've not necessarily come across before. I'm tempted to ask you about the history of osteopathy and how you got into it, but we have had other osteos on, and I don't want to necessarily spend time on that particularly because it's probably a pretty similar story. But
yeah,
I've not heard the phrase systems biology before, so let's spend a little time there. Well, what does that actually mean?
It's understanding how the systems of the body all interconnect and interrelate. Nothing operates in isolation. So in medicine, because of the complexity of the human body, we have to somewhat compartmentalize different parts or systems into their own respective fields because there's so much to learn about it. But by doing that, you kind of almost miss the way things interrelate and interconnect. There's the definition of a specialist, somebody that knows more and more about less and less until they know everything about nothing. And that's not quite fair, but it's kind of like that. When you've got, maybe a gut problem, you go and see the gastroenterologist. When you have a joint problem, you might see the orthopedist. If you have a foot problem, it's a podiatrist. If you have a brain problem, it's a neurologist, and so on. So there's a siloing of medicine. And by doing so, they often miss the kind of interconnected relationships. And I think systems biology thinking is about understanding how everything works in a network, a web-like interaction where you pull on one thing and everything else has to respond, like a tensegrity model, almost like putting on a spider web. Everything's kind of moving together. And in functional medicine and in osteopathy, we're really trying to understand how everything interconnects and interrelates. The body as a unit is one of the principles of osteopathy. Everything is connected. So if somebody has a problem in one area, the question is why and where's that coming from? Oftentimes the area of complaint is a symptom or a compensation for something else going on in the system. And a systems approach steps back, looks at the big picture, and tries to understand where it's all coming from.
Nice.
That's one way to think about it.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. It strikes me weirdly, as someone who spends a bit of time thinking about modern government and what's going on and why we've been told this or told that, and the idea of like centrally planned economies. Someone saying, okay, we're going to set the price of this at that without any thinking as to the side effects of what that might mean.
Mm.
And just one example that comes to mind is you might remember there was a brand called Tom's Shoes, and they were sourced in South America, and you buy a pair on the streets of London, and someone would get a free pair of shoes in wherever they were made, and it was sold as this amazingly altruistic product. But the impact of that was that it completely decimated the shoe industry in the place where people could suddenly get them for free, and people lost companies and lost the wherewithal to actually make shoes. And so intervention in itself isn't always the right option.
Not at all.
That's just another way of kind of looking at it. It's like, that's kind of like that, isn't it?
It made me think of well, first of all, I think it is it's a undeniable truth or law or principle of nature. It made me think of the like the food chain or the like biosystems.
Yeah, everyone has a predator in a sense.
That's right. Yeah, and you take one piece of the puzzle out and everything falls apart. So it really requires a more broad understanding of how these relationships work.
And so when it comes to making suggestions for people as to what they could implement, the feedback loop between their actions and your analysis is obviously very important. Something I've struggled with when I've taken advice from people like yourself over the years is actually doing the thing I'm told to do. As stupid as it sounds, right? You can spend this money, you can go and get a consultation, and then it's like, here are these pills that you should take as a supplement for however long, or a homeopathic remedy, or whatever the case might be, or cut this out of your diet. And it's often harder than it should be, at least in my personal case, to use me as an example.
Yeah. How
do you keep a tab with the impact of these suggestions, especially when considering that there's lots of potential different outcomes that can come from it? Like, how do you get that feedback loop to function? Because otherwise you'd never learn what the impact was in a way.
Yeah. I guess we always approach it as an N of one study, an N of one relationship. So that individual is going to respond in their own unique way. And so applying generic protocols isn't necessarily going to work for everybody. So, although there are principles that we leverage that generally apply for most people. Everybody needs to probably move their body enough. Everybody needs to sleep a certain amount. Everybody needs a certain amount of nutrition, etc. The detail is in the little differences that can make a huge impact on an individual's response. I guess, to your point about how it can be tricky to actually implement the advice, like that's one thing. You could give them the best plan, the most customized, bespoke protocol based on a lot of objective data. But then if they're not ready for change and they're not willing to make the right changes, and that needs to be unpacked with a lot of people, because it can come back to old programs and self-sabotaging behaviors and so on, then it can be hard to kind of actually get that to work. I would say that the way that I structure my services is through a filtering process that screens people as to their sort of, readiness to commit to this sort of process. So I tend to work with people that are very motivated and, desperate for help, and they're willing to make significant changes. So when we do suggest an overhaul, let's say with their nutrition or a supplementation plan, there's usually not much resistance to that. But for the average person, the type of recommendations that we make to really transform their health can be really difficult to apply. But in terms of when you apply a particular protocol or strategy to an individual, you need constant feedback. It doesn't always play out like it does in the textbooks. This is where we just try and teach patients to just be self-aware and to track and monitor their responses. And if things are moving in the right direction, we lean into that. If things aren't quite working out, we need to understand why. Sometimes there are temporary regressions in somebody's health, which is part of a healing process, which isn't wrong necessarily, but might not be pleasant. And if it's understood in that light, then people can kind of navigate their way through that. Where there are other situations where clearly things aren't going well and it's not appropriate, and you just have to course correct and troubleshoot. So this requires a lot of contact and being accessible. So there's, with my patients, typically they have my direct mobile number, and they can call me and text me and help, anytime there's any issues, so that we can get feedback in the moment and then course correct as we go. And that's, that's not easy. And that's why I think when you compare the amount of time that I spend with a patient to the typical doctor's visit, which might be 5-10 minutes if you're lucky, and the continuity of care and the follow-up and the responsibility and the responsiveness is chalk and cheese, really.
Yeah, it's a whole nother level, isn't it? And that, in a way, Rick, brings us nicely back to this idea of productizing what you know, and actually how challenging that really is, as you've now kind of taken me through these different steps and different scenarios. Because, like, how are you going to do that? Like, on the one hand, you've got generic AI models that you can now type in the sentence, and in some cases can give you pretty accurate information. And on the other, you've got the traditional system that's very interested in symptoms, but is highly niche, and you described it as siloed expertise. Very interesting. And so obviously you sit in the middle somewhere there, where it's like, actually people like contact with other people.
Yeah.
But equally, your information is very valuable. So you don't want to be spending hours of every day texting like 10 customers. So how are you going to do it? Yeah, I'd love to understand.
It's a challenge, and I don't think I've quite figured that out yet. There's only so many people I can serve in that capacity. There's only so many hours in the day. So I think that way of doing things is capped. You know what I mean? And it's not necessarily the most efficient way to go about this. But I think, as the systems evolve and we start incorporating more AI systems into our model of care, I think we can probably serve a lot more people and leverage technology in that way. There's so much information out there, isn't it? It's just trying to distill out chaff from the wheat from the chaff sort of thing. But
I could imagine a very, and this is probably how you already do it, but a very hands-on initial consult. 2, 3, 4 hours where you're like, I need to know absolutely everything about who you are and why you're at this table right now. After which you can think about what you need to tell them. And then that becomes a program over, I don't know how many weeks you do it, but something I've been studying recently, and shout out to Daniel, who I started a coaching program with, but actually put it on hold. I can put you in touch with him, but he was talking through this idea of how different product offerings can be pitched at different price rates. And essentially it's about figuring out where you can fit into that kind of matrix. And obviously if you sell an online course, you can probably charge $50 for it, or maybe $500 if it's very specific for some type of person. But you can sell it multiple times at zero marginal cost of additional fulfillment. But it's quite hard to actually sell that thing because maybe no one knows about who you are and what you do. In the middle, you've got a kind of a done with you format of like, okay, here's a lot of content. I'll do a weekly coaching call. You can crunch through it in your own time and have a community kind of conversation each week, through to like literally one-on-one coaching. And it strikes me that what you've done so far is very much in that one-on-one space.
Absolutely.
Right. You've been really hands-on with customers. And as you said, you deal with a lot of repetition. So it'd be like, okay, well, what do you repeat the most often? So, okay, well, that's a good thing to make content about.
Exactly. That's the project.
Is that what you're going through now?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so teach me about how that process has been, because I think there's so many people out there today that are incredibly well, what's the right way of saying it? They've reached a depth of expertise in their niche that is really incredibly valuable. But how that's then packaged up and sold is not actually that straightforward. But if you could do it, would be a really successful business and help a lot of people.
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point around the one-to-one situation with my work currently, I've thought a lot about this over the years. There's a lot of different care delivery models out there where they're doing one-to-many and they're having like coaching programs in groups. They can get a lot more reach, but then they don't necessarily get that one-on-one and the really bespoke care that sometimes people are looking for or maybe even require. I guess personally, I just prefer working closely with individuals and really kind of spending a lot of time, I guess, with them throughout this process. It's roughly a 12-week process that I take as like the initial intensive. But I actually quite like that way of working, although there's a limit to who I can obviously work with in that style. But with the educational portal that I'm developing, there's a balance to strike, really, because there's information that's fairly generic and principle based that can apply to most people, but there's also lots of caveats and tweaks and customizations that are required that need to be incorporated into that sort of platform that I then help them navigate them through, like with my more one-on-one work. So at the moment, we have a discovery call with a prospect patient just to learn a little bit more about their kind of history, their complaints, and it's really a screening call to determine whether or not they're a good fit for the practice and whether I'm a good fit for them. We then move into an initial consultation, which is like a non-committal first step where we do a lot more of a deeper dive into their story. And this is where they fill in like detailed forms that take a few hours to fill in. Then I review them and we sit down and discuss their case in more depth. And this is where I try to give them an impression on their case from a functional medicine perspective, and then make recommendations for the type of laboratory testing that we would run to objectify our impression. And then, if they're keen and it feels like a good fit for them, we onboard them into the program and they move through a series of consultations. Initially, we spend a lot of time laying down what I call foundations of health. And it really centers around what I call the pillars of health: nutrition, sleep quality, movement, stress management, minimizing toxicity in the environment, so on, as we're waiting for test results to come in. And some of that's fairly general. Some of it can be highly customized based on their situation, their needs and preferences. And then as the results are coming in, the lab findings, we then move into more specific, highly customized protocols and then support them through the implementation of that. But the educational portal I'm working on is really providing a lot of the knowledge base that sometimes is hard to get across in a face-to-face consultation. So it's there for them to explore, dip into as need be, and I can guide them to specific aspects of that relate to their case in more depth. So it's a bit of a work in progress. I haven't quite ironed out all the creases with it, but I think once it's done, I think the offering is going to be even more powerful and transformative for the patient. But in terms of like reach, some of that could potentially be packaged up into smaller modular courses that might be more of a DIY approach for people that don't necessarily need the hand holding and support. Some of it can be done, without even lab work. Then maybe they want to use diet lifestyle interventions beyond that without actually doing the lab side of things. So there's lots of ways we could spin off from that, I think.
Yeah, it's really cool thinking through it. And so have you like hired a space where you're like presenting to a camera, and like how are you kind of organizing the content side of it? Like, do you have to sit down and like write a whole script, or?
Yes, at the moment I've structured the course layout into like sections and all the components. There's a welcome, there's sort of like an onboarding section, there's key concepts that I want to get across before we move into the nitty gritty. And then there are pillars of health sections that center around diet, lifestyle factors, sleep, and so on. And I'm working through just writing up the content for each of those sections, which will then probably serve as a bit of a script for a video to accompany those text-written educational pieces. Alongside that, there'll be resources, links to websites, blogs, handouts, and cheat sheets, products that I recommend, etc. All kind of within the platform. So, step by step, I've got the structure. I'm semi-way through some of the content. Once the content's written up, I'll probably record a lot of the content, because people will probably prefer a video as well. And I think that will.
Well, and you'll have lots to say as well, Rick. That's half the problem. I think is like
there's so much.
It's so crazy with content. It's like I could just ask you a question, and you'll just have so much to say about that one thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's amazing where you can kind of point one's mind and just see where it takes you.
Yeah, look, it's like a never-ending double click on it. It's like, okay, but what's under that? What's under that? It's never.
Yeah. Well, and why? It's so interesting, isn't it? The process of building these things as well. It's like, do you start going down the like, I'm going to use adverts thing, or could you have like a podcast of your own and it's like organic content? There's just so many different ways of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I did about a year ago now was work with a company just to help with patient acquisition.
Okay.
And just sort of helping to attract and nurture prospect patients for the clinic ethically, you know what I mean? So that's been a bit of a learning curve for me. But it's, there's a lot of great practitioners out there, but they just don't have the voice, so they're not in front of the right patients. And that's something that I'm just working on personally. We have a website, we have various funnels and lead magnets and free education to help patients learn about what we do at the clinic and how we can potentially help them. And it's all really steering them towards picking up the phone and having a chat. And then we can really kind of go from there.
And it's that interesting thing, isn't it? The kind of concept of like, when the teacher is ready, the student appears. Or is that the right way around saying it? I can't remember. I completely butchered that.
I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean? Though, it's like, I kind of think about it from when I'm building this podcast. It's like when the guest is ready, they appear. And it's some people I've sent like multiple messages to, trying to get them to join, and just never heard from them. And that's totally okay. And one person I will message, like, we had a quick conversation, so it was like, yeah, cool, let's do it. Like, oh, nice. It was just so like straightforward.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's similar when patients are looking for the right healthcare, because they've, as you mentioned, they might have tried a ton of other different things. And it's where I've got into this more kind of spiritual side of things and looking at energetics and vibration and the use of meditation and things. You can actually raise your vibration. And when you're operating at a certain level, like, people just don't turn up. Because they haven't made it that far. And it might well be the case with this kind of thing, where it's like, this is life-changing health information that helps anyone, essentially. Like, even if you're not sick, or you think you're not sick, if you go and do one of these programs, you'd be better off for it.
Yeah.
So how does that, I don't know, any thoughts with that? I'm intrigued, just like, is it true that like when the patient is ready, Dr. Rick appears?
I'd probably pop up on their search terms or something on internet search. Yeah, that's interesting. I've found it interesting. The longer I've done this work over the years, you kind of see how people kind of pop up into the diary. Some of them are sort of just ready to just start yesterday. Perhaps they've read my website content, maybe seen a podcast interview with me before, and they know me through those mediums, and they're ready for the work. A lot of the patients actually come find me based off of listening to other functional medicine practitioners in the field. And they might have heard, Mark Hyman, who's a big name in functional medicine, on a podcast. Functional medicine, that sounds interesting. And they Google functional medicine near me, and I happen to be, around the corner.
Yes. Okay.
And they're like, I want to do functional medicine. I know what it's all about. There's no pre-education required. They're all in.
Yes.
And they're often, a little bit kind of disillusioned by the conventional approach. Then there are patients that they're not quite ready yet. They end up back in full circle, and it can sometimes take months or even years. I've had patients where they clearly would be a good candidate for the approach. It might have been financial issues. Maybe they weren't quite sure if I was the right fit, and they go around and they talk to other people. In our kind of patient acquisition, we have pathways for, all those types, really. People jump on straight away, and then there's nurture sequences that educate them, and a lot of people don't even know they need functional medicine. They don't know what functional medicine is. They need a solution. They just haven't quite put it together yet. And with the education we can provide, it suddenly just clicks for them, and they're like, oh yeah, that's it. And then they come back in, and then we can hopefully help them.
Really cool. And I think sometimes it's about still doing it. Now, this sounds crazy, but I think about this almost from a kind of podcast perspective as one angle, is where you might see someone's short clip or a tweet, and then you might watch a medium form, and eventually you listen to a full length episode. And throughout that kind of journey, the relationship with the podcast host is evolving, or the guests that they particularly like listening to, until eventually it's like, okay, I'm actually regularly listening to this stuff. But that takes a long time. I mean, it can take like, 3, 4, 5 years to suddenly, I've got to listen to a full episode of this stuff because I've seen it in so many other ways. So I'm sure that the patient acquisition thing's similar. It's like, that guy's still there doing functional medicine stuff, and look at all these other extra results they've got. I better get back in touch.
Yeah. And then it kind of carries on after the work they've done with me. So one of the things I love doing is basically helping to recover somebody's health, helping them recover their own health.
Wow, that must be so cool.
Yeah. So that they eventually get to me, we do the work, and they do the work really, because, I'm just a facilitator. They're the one that's actually going to be putting it into practice. And as they start healing, and as their symptoms start fading away and they're getting their energy back, they're getting their confidence back, they're getting their focus back, they're off, and now they're sort of self-educating, and it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. It's like a snowball effect, as it rolls, it just gets bigger and better as we go. So I kind of see myself as somebody trying to learn how to ride a bike. They're just falling off all the time. I'm there just holding for stability, and then I give them a little push, and then all of a sudden they're riding on their own, and then now they're doing Tour de France. And I just feel privileged to be able to just help get them on the right path and recover their health to the point where they have the resources and the understanding, the know-how to just apply that to the rest of their life going forward.
What an incredible investment. Like, how do you calculate the ROI on that? Well, it's very difficult to do from a kind of financial numbers perspective. This is where I've got, I guess, more sophisticated as an investor over the last few years, but it's not just about financial returns. It's also about your humanistic capital and your intellectual capital. And if you're not working on both the humanistic and the intellectual, then you'll never drive financial returns. And so figuring out your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, they're very, very important things to do.
Yeah.
And actually, this reminds me of something you touched on earlier. You mentioned the whole being when you look at someone in the analysis phase of an onboarding. What did you mean by that when you talk about someone's whole being?
Yeah. I guess, look, I probably don't take it as far as you can do, because you can go deep into the psyche, deep into the sort of spiritual domain, the metaphysical. Kind of keep my work really more tangible, to be fair. Although I'm kind of, I do think that way. When I mean the whole being or the whole person, a holistic approach, it's not just looking at the bit that hurts. It's not just looking at the bit that's diseased, the organ that's dysfunctional. It's looking at the person who's in front of you and appreciating that they have a story, have a background, they have a whole life before that, and all the events that had led up to now, has its legacy, and also the environment that they're within has its effects. So we're trying to look at the person as an individual, appreciating their background, but also looking at their current and past environment and how that ultimately results in their health expression. You can talk about it from a genetics perspective. You've heard about genes loading the gun, but the environment pulling the trigger. The environment sends messages that ultimately express our genetic sort of inheritance, I guess. The epigenetic effects of our environment, our choices and our behavior ultimately can turn on and off genes. And appreciating how all that comes together at that time with a patient that's in front of you, I guess, is important.
Wow. And again, you touch on so many things, Rick. I'm like, oh my God, that's like another hour-long podcast. We'll dive down that hole or dive down that hole. What I'm intrigued to do, though, is like, there's so many people out there that are sick. Like, why is everyone struggling so much? What is the like, why are we all not feeling right?
Yeah. Big question.
Like, in some ways, like, you shouldn't have a customer.
Yeah. Look, I think that innately we're wired for health. Every cell in your body is designed to function properly. Health is the sort of, the default setting.
The base case. Yeah.
It's the base case. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what we're sort of witnessing, I mean, there's lots we can talk about here, but I guess the question is like, why are we all so sick nowadays? And
yeah. Is there like a specific driver that you can pinpoint, or is it's going to be multiple things? Yeah,
there are many. Yeah, I think ultimately it's a mismatch between what our genes require for good health expression and the environment. I think it can be boiled down to that. In fact, functional medicine can be distilled down to two words: get rid. There's the get rid model that we often talk about in functional medicine. And when the body doesn't have its needs met, then I think that's when disease ensues. So I guess the problem is that we're not meeting our biological needs for health, and there's so many aspects to that we can talk about. So we can talk about it simply from a nutritional point of view. So a lot of us are not eating healthy diets anymore. The nutrition that we eat is depleted of nutrients. It's highly processed and refined, full of additives and preservatives and all these chemicals that just are foreign to our biology. A lot of us are dehydrated. We don't get enough fluids in. A lot of us are sleep deprived. A lot of us are just stressed to the high heavens for various reasons. We don't move our bodies enough, or maybe we move our bodies too much. We cause a lot of stress and breakdown as a result. There's a ton of environmental exposures we're now, exposed to day to day now. You could call them toxins, xenobiotics, etc., that are just messing up our physiology. And I think there also is a societal sickness, and I mean, it's not really my area, but, just the way that we're bringing up our kids these days, and the screen time, the pressure on social media, just the air we breathe, the water we drink, all those things. This is what I call like the exposome, all of the non-genetic factors that influence our gene expression from day one of birth to now. And when you look back through time, when populations were generally healthier and we didn't have so much chronic disease, we were just aligned with nature. I think a lot of the issue is a disalignment with nature. And people used to eat real food. They used to drink clean water. They used to breathe fresh air. They used to move their body regularly through the day. They used to sleep when the sun went down.
What a surprise. They felt great.
They had great relationships. They probably didn't have the same, financial strain and existential stresses that are going on.
Angst. Yeah. That's crazy, isn't it? When you wake up in the morning and within 2 hours you happen to have glanced at like X many screens and the news is playing and someone's been bombed somewhere far, far away, but like you drive to work, there's multiple traffic lights, and you arrive and you just, you probably got caffeine in there and you're just completely frazzled before you even started your work day.
It's crazy.
This is a huge rabbit hole, isn't it? Really, it's your whole life, like all of these different things that are hitting you all day long, EMFs, different toxins in the water, like everything,
all of it. So,
and it will keep. I mean, you'll be busy for a long time, I'm sure, Rick. What is there? Oh, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, going back to that as well. This get rid model, I think, is a good concept for everybody just to take away, because when they just apply it to their life, hopefully things just get better. So get everything the body needs for good health. So good nutrition, good sleep, good movement, good relationships, that kind of stuff. And then the rid side of it is to remove all of the irritants, the obstructions and barriers to that health expression. So get off the crap. Stop, poisoning yourself. Just get rid of all that stuff. And when you tip the equation in the right direction, that's when health ensues. The body will move in the direction of health when we tend to do the right thing. With my individual patients, there's all this stuff going on like we described, but we use the lab testing to help really answer the question, what's really going on here? Like what systems are imbalanced and dysfunctional? What nutrients might be deficient? What hormones are out of range? What type of infections somebody might have in their gut? What sort of foods may their immune system be reacting to? And so with all that, usually with a patient, there's a long list of possible suspects as to what could be driving their health issue. And then with the sort of structure of functional medicine, the thought process, the framework, and the objectivity behind the lab work that we do, we can then take that long list of possible suspects and distill it down to a smaller group of likely perpetrators. And then we can kind of intervene and treat what we find and watch the body, change. That's essentially their approach.
I love the use of the testing, because like there are some tests that you couldn't do 10 years ago that you now can. It's like, great, that's a data set that didn't used to exist that's now accessible to the retail market. Awesome. But it's that age-old kind of business concept, like what gets measured gets managed. And so if you're not taking this experience seriously, like you're not getting the data that you need, and then from there you can make other decisions. Rick, I'm wondering, have you ever read a book called Fiat Food?
No.
Okay, I'll have to send this to you.
Sounds good.
When we finish recording. But it's I mean, it can't go past the hour without dropping into the mix, like the money and Bitcoin, and of course, how many years ago it was that we first met, and I was banging on about it. The connection between the money and the food and the health system and people who are proponents of the type of practice that you run, like Bitcoin and functional medicine are like best mates, essentially, which is like, taking responsibility for your own actions, making things better for yourself, and building from a base case that's far healthier. And you already talked about how some of your customers, they just get so much better that they're suddenly, doing the Tour de France as the example. I believe that when you take on the Bitcoin standard financially, that's what it does for you in a similar sense for your wealth.
Absolutely. There's
Fiat food. Please go, Rick, please.
No, just agreeing with what you're saying. There's huge contrasts and parallels you can make between Bitcoin and its fix for the failing monetary system and I guess health and functional medicine, what that has to offer.
So Fiat Food is a book written by a investigative journalist, and it just picks to pieces a lot of the basic government intervention in the food system in the US that's happened over the last 50 years. And you start to see the special interest groups pushing through all their different agendas, and it's obviously often profit driven. And the cover-ups of case studies where there's health disbenefits, and it's so corrupt, and it goes so deep that people are eating industrial sludge thinking they're healthy. It's just insane what's happening. And it's no surprise that in the Bitcoin space, I know so many carnivores. Now, that's not to say that carnivore is the optimal diet strategy for every single person, but a lot of these guys, in particular men, they feel 20 years younger. And it's like they've done that, the get rid process. They got rid of the seed oils, they got rid of the gluten, they got rid of the alcohol and the sugar, and they feel incredible again. They're like, wow, how did I not feel like this for the last 10 years? I'll have to send you that link for sure.
That sounds good. I like it by the sound of things.
And so, Rick, one thing I'd love to just spend a little bit of time on is I was advocating for Bitcoin a number of years ago, and you've done all this in the same way that a patient might do this. You started buying yourself. So, just a moment, how has your Bitcoin journey been? And are you now advocating to other people that this is a good thing to try?
I am. Yeah, it's been great. I'm really enjoying the learning. When did it all start? Yeah, you were the one that orange pilled me. Yeah, big time. I remember we used to have some chats about it. It wasn't on my radar. I mean, I wasn't very financially literate like my whole life until probably COVID. So I had a bit more time, looked into investing and wanted to sort of learn how all that worked. I didn't really understand the fiat scam and the printing of money out of nowhere. And it wasn't until I read the book you recommended, the Bitcoin Standard, that it all sort of, opened up.
It opens up, right?
And I'm like, hang on a minute, this is like healthcare. This is like the problem with healthcare, basically just with money. And it goes deeper than that, right? It's politics, it's everything. I remember you saying to me, Rick, just get some skin in the game. Like, just buy a little bit, and just learn how it works. So that's what I did. I just bought a little bit, and then bought a little bit more, learned a lot more about it, read the Bitcoin Standard, and I just thought, you know what, there's something to this. And as I got more and more confident in Bitcoin, I guess, and what it is, the technology, crypto in general, blockchain, etc., and more so, as I started to understand what it's there to fix, I was like, this resonates with me, and it kind of ticks all the boxes and aligned with my values. And so I just kept cost averaging. Yeah.
Epic.
And, originally my wife and I, Michelle, we were looking at developing wealth through property, houses that buy houses and you get a portfolio, and at the end of it, you can retire and all that kind of thing. But it didn't quite play out for us. We had 2 babies. I was the only one working. I didn't qualify for serviceability for the second house, so we were stuck with one investment property, which has done really well, and we're happy we bought it. Might sell it for more Bitcoin, by the way. That's I'll chat to you about it on another. We were just.
Well, that's where the skin in the game is important, because until you've had it, you don't realize that actually selling the investment property even might be a good idea.
Yeah,
exactly. You haven't felt Bitcoin like surge in purchasing power. You don't have to do anything. It just sits in self-custody. It's wild.
Yeah, exactly. So we had this money just sitting there in the offset account, ready for the second property. And we're like, it's just sitting there, it's saving us a little bit of interest, but we need to think about making that work harder for us. And it took a while to, talk Michelle into it, but we ended up pulling a lot of that out and then more of that out and just buying more and more Bitcoin. And then every time it crashed, I was like, yes, buying it for cheap today. And
nice.
I got the conviction. I do see it as potentially promising for my financial future. And,
Brilliant. And shout out to Michelle, obviously. What a legend for and everyone who's got into Bitcoin, whether it's the husband or wife first, the other one eventually catches up. And it requires work from both of you.
It does.
And it's faith in the other one that they're making the right decisions. And it's like a typical team, right? As husband and wife, you've got to specialize in different things with each other and back the other one when they're like, no, we should do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, Rick, go.
Yeah. So that's been my kind of journey, really. And I'm still just, keeping my finger in the pie with it in terms of like learning and don't get freaked out like I used to. I remember the first time I was sending some Bitcoin from an exchange to my wallet, because I self-custody now.
Yeah.
I was like freaking out. Where is it? It's a massive learning curve, right? It can get a little technical.
Yeah.
Haven't quite got onto the multi-sig, that you guys talk about a bit. And like I said, we are looking at potentially even selling the investment property to potentially invest more. Not quite sure there yet, but when you do the numbers and you just look at all the issues with property these days and returns and the headache of having a tenant and the potential for damage to the property and land taxes, etc. When you measure it up,
Rick, when we finish the podcast tonight, hop onto Grok and ask it, say, what is the opportunity cost of owning leveraged Australian real estate versus Bitcoin over the next 5 years?
Done it already. Done it already, mate. I've already
crazy.
I've presented it to Michelle. She's on the same page.
Yeah.
I think so we'll see where that goes. But
take your time. There's no rush. But there's no doubt in my mind that owning physical real estate, unless it's your primary residence or you get benefits from the shelter from it, as a purely investment, as a purely financial play, Bitcoin's going to eat it every single day of the week.
Yeah. Look, one of the things I've also realized as well is that when everybody's doing it, it's not necessarily the right thing to do.
Yes.
We're all just sort of like programmed to be following along with probably what, people who pull the strings want us to
the money printers actually want us to think. Yes.
So
Rick, one thing I'd love to just spend a little time on at the end here before we wrap it up is one of my core kind of beliefs of what Bitcoin does is it allows people to specialize in a way that's actually never really been possible before. And so when it comes to the offering that you're creating, for example, you are an absolute expert in your niche. You have a huge depth of wisdom to generate value for people and be paid for that expertise. And the question is like, how do you scale that? Well, one of the benefits of it, if you really love the one-on-one coaching, for example, like don't break something that's working well. Carry on doing it. Try and maybe find a price point that might be slightly higher so you can create better returns. But the revenues generated after costs that is then essentially just cash piles sitting there can be put into Bitcoin. And you get startup-like returns over the next 5 years with a risk profile that's arguably better than gold. And so it's like, what the fuck? You can spend your time focused absolutely in the area that you are brilliant and spend more time getting better at it. And your surplus productivity can be stored in this savings technology that can't be taken from you and is going to beat most venture capital funds. But it's less risky than a traditional bank. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And so someone like yourself, I think, is a brilliant person to consider that. Perhaps you're already doing it, but it really makes me incredibly excited about the future in terms of what people are going to be capable of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Can I ask you a question quickly?
Absolutely.
What are your potential fears for the future of Bitcoin? Is there anything that sort of is in the back of your mind, like a little kind of
My biggest fear is human error. So, what if I didn't write the seed phrase down correctly? Or what if I send it to the wrong place? Or what if I make the multi-sig setup too complicated and I put a passphrase on one of the keys and then I can't remember what the passphrase is and it's gone? That, I think, is, from a probability perspective, the main hurdle that most people have. Either they make it so simple that it's too easy to be stolen, or they make it so complicated that they fuck it up themselves. And so finding the middle ground is really important. And that's why I'd always recommend for people to get, reach out to a friend of yours that's a Bitcoin expert, get proper consulting work done. Think of them like a lawyer or an accountant, because if you're going to be your own bank, you do not want to get it wrong. When people bring up things like quantum computing and actually the idea of like, oh, well, what happens if someone can build a computer that can break the cryptography that creates the security for Bitcoin? Whilst that's a risk, I think it's very, very low probability. And if it does get created, then a hell of a lot of shit's also completely screwed as well. So it's just not a reality right now. And therefore, the whole concept of focus on what you can control, that'd be a classic one of getting stressed about something that you just have no control over. So yeah, get your nuts and bolts of your self-custody really dialed down, get good advice for it. There's loads of people out there that will help you through that process now. In a way that just didn't exist 5 years ago, right? You can log on to the Bitcoin Mentor website and have a consultancy in, the next day, no problem, as an example. Fears. I mean, it's a funny one. Like this whole. So we hung out in 2020, I think, Rick, was that for the first time?
Yeah.
Like the COVID lockdown period, and with Michelle and when our first daughters were born, and I was really flying deep down the rabbit hole then. I'd already owned Bitcoin for about 5 years. And the last 5 years has really been a case of, why am I wrong? Someone please somewhere tell me how I'm wrong. And in the thousands of hours and all the podcasting I've done, I've not found a single explanation that gives me the heebie-jeebies. Yes, I had some scenarios where I sent funds from one place to another and they took ages to turn up. Like one example in particular, I used a UK exchange to send somewhere, and I couldn't see it in the wallet I'd sent it to, and it said it had been processed. I was like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And it's like losing your wallet, but like you can't cancel the card. It's a lot worse than that. And it turned out it was a bank holiday in the UK, and the exchange had a certain feature to their process where you needed to have someone come in and click yes. And the day that the exchange opened for business, the next day it was done. But there was about a 12 to 18 hour period when I'm like, oh my god, what have I done? Like falling asleep that night was a disaster. So long story short, Rick, there's really nothing that like doesn't make me like sleep well at night. So yeah, that would be how I'd answer that.
And what are you most excited about for the future? Maybe from a regulatory framework perspective.
Great question. So the main thing, I mean, to be very specific about regulations, first and foremost, every country is different. So wherever you are in the world, if you're listening right now, you've got to go and look at the very specific regulations that are in place for whatever financial jurisdiction you're in. I think the very general trend is that the more regulatory clarity, the better. And the way that this thing actually 10x's from here is only ever going to be with professionally managed money. And professionally managed money can't do fucking anything without abiding by whatever regulatory system is in place. So if Bitcoin's roughly a $2 trillion market cap today, the gold market, in my opinion, is really, that's the one we're after as the next milestone. It's a $25 trillion market. So you've got 10x upside from here. And so, the ETF approvals last year were a massive moment because suddenly it was very easy to allocate if you're a pension fund, insurance fund, using the public markets. You don't need to own this thing any longer. You can own a piece of paper Bitcoin on top, and you're dealing with BlackRock, so you've got existing relationships with them already. So I'm very confident that that's all going in the right direction. It's the nature of the beast such that 5 years ago, or even back to like the 2017 bull market where Bitcoin verged up towards 20K for the first time. we're now, 5x, 6x from that. And therefore, when the retail market turns up, it can't move the market as much. Individuals just don't have as much firepower as the massive institutions that manage, billions, trillions of dollars. And if they make a 1% allocation, that actually starts to change the market cap of Bitcoin in a serious way. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Like the Bitcoin treasury boom that we're seeing, all these publicly traded companies, that's a fascinating shift in the market. So now instead of owning Bitcoin, you can go and own an equity in a company that specializes in owning Bitcoin. But it's full of nuance. So the type of companies that you can buy, like there's one here in Australia called Locate, I believe. The CEO, Steve, I'm going to try and get on the podcast. I've been in touch with him. It's on the ASX. You can go and buy it. But I don't know if people are valuing that business because it's a logistics company in the software space, or they're valuing it because it's a Bitcoin company. There's another business called Semler Scientific that's listed in the States. The markets still think of that as a medical business. And even though it's got 3,000-4,000 Bitcoin, no one cares because it's largely a medical company. Whereas Metaplanet in Japan is a brilliant example of a business that went absolutely gangbusters for Bitcoin, and the price has gone crazy. But none of these companies would exist without regulatory frameworks. And so in general, I'm very welcoming for it. I guess the only thing I'll say at the end of that is I'm still very, very dubious as to whether or not the rest of the crypto market is anything of value at all. And it's clear that Bitcoin's been treated separately to that, generally speaking. But most other crypto tokens, in my mind, are highly speculative software projects with corruptible CEOs that are building on the back of Bitcoin's innovation, saying mine's slightly better than Bitcoin in this way, buy my thing. And all they're really doing is taking money off the retail market and buying Bitcoin themselves. And so like those guys, I would assume, are pushing for as much regulatory clarity as possible, but I don't know if they're going to get it because it's a different beast entirely. Even though they'll tell everyone that they're regulated and everything's amazing. So, be very careful out there, essentially, with things that aren't Bitcoin. And equally, be very careful with paper Bitcoin. So that's how people describe either owning these Bitcoin treasury companies or owning an ETF. You don't actually own Bitcoin. Unless you've got it in self-custody, that's someone else giving you an IOU of some form. And that's just, it's not the same at all. So for true financial sovereignty, you want to be getting this stuff into self-custody where it just can't be taken from you. And if you don't figure out self-custody, then you haven't truly understood the beauty of it as a form of private property rights that has never existed before. And so Bitcoin in self-custody, in my opinion, is a superpower for the individual that if you don't get your head around how it actually works, you miss it for what it actually is, which is an extraordinary innovation.
Thanks.
No worries. And I could go for about 4 hours. Rick, so cool. We've flown past the 60 minutes, and that's where I tend to try and wrap these things up. So just a final question is, if people want to reach out and get in touch, which could easily be the case today, having listened to you and the health ailments they've got, what's the best way to find you?
Sure. So I would say the best way to reach out, or at least learn a little bit more about what we do at the clinic. When I say we, it's my wife and I have a clinic here in Caulfield South in Melbourne. So find us at www.thehealthformula.com.au, and you'll be able to learn a little bit about what we do. Functional medicine is available to anybody, interstate. You don't have to come into the premises to be able to work with us in that capacity. But if you need an osteopath and you need, to get on the table, then you've obviously got to make it to the clinic. But that would be probably the best way. We are on, Instagram, but we're not really too active there. But you can learn a bit more about us at our Instagram as well, The Health Formula.
Cool. Awesome. And we'll pop all of that in the show notes as well, so people can find you easily. Interesting, Rick. It just strikes me then that as an osteopath, you're tied to physical treatments.
Yes.
Whereas as a functional medicine doctor, you can do digital consults and people can get blood tests and stool tests in their local areas.
Exactly.
Really cool. Okay. Yeah. What a great way of kind of scaling your expertise in that sense. Well, Rick, really awesome to spend some time together. Thank you so much for joining.
It's really good fun. Thanks for inviting me on. Cheers, mate.